Hello all, welcome to Narayana IAS Academy. This is Sureka Bhaskar presenting to you the daily news analysis. So for today's discussion, we've picked up a number of articles from The Hindu and the Indian Express which are both important and relevant for the UPSC CSE examination. Now let us have a look at the topics one by one. The first article for the day has been picked up from page number 10 of the Indian Express, Oath taking in the Lok Sabha. So in this particular article, we'll be discussing about the process and how significant the practice of oath is for the newly elected MPs in the Lok Sabha. So also we'll be discussing about what is the historical origin of this practice of taking oath and the relevant constitutional provisions with respect to the same. The next article has been picked up from page number 6 of The Hindu, Create the Space for Governance with a Green Heart. So in this particular article, we'll be discussing on how important it is for the government in order to adopt the green policies in order to combat the environmental degradation by focusing on the climate resilience, the forest conservation, the Himalayan protection, the urban sustainability as well as the public participation. The third article has been picked up from page number 12 of The Hindu, Advisory on Organ Transplantation to be put up at the airports. As we know that there has been a significant increase in the number of foreigners visiting India for this particular process of organ transplantation, the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare has actually come up with issuing an advisory in order to sensitize the foreign patients on the regulatory framework or the legal backing of organ transplantation in India. So in this particular article, we'll be discussing about the legal framework which is associated with organ transplantation as well as the provisions related to the foreign patients. The fourth article has been picked up from page number 11 of the Indian Express, Government mulls a dedicated bank for MSME to enhance the credit access and environmental growth. So in this particular article, we'll be discussing about the recent plan of the Indian government in order to establish a dedicated or a separate bank for the sector of MSMEs in lieu of the difficulty that the MSME sector faces with respect to access of credit. The last article for the day has been picked up from page number 10 of The Hindu. After years, Russia approves draft logistics agreement with that of India. So in this particular article, we'll be discussing about the RELOS, that is nothing but the reciprocal exchange of logistics agreement that will be signed between India as well as Russia, the significance as well as the key provisions of it. And towards the end of the session, we'll be solving few prelims as well as the mains practice questions. And now let us get into the discussion. The first article for the day is oath taking in the Lok Sabha. So in this particular article, we'll be discussing about how significant and important is this particular practice of taking oath, specifically for the recently elected MPs of the Lok Sabha. And also, we'll be looking into the historical origin of this particular practice as well as the relevant constitutional provisions with respect to the same. So in this particular article, we'll be discussing about this particular process of oath taking in the legislature as well as it is a part of the Indian Constitution. And we can map this entire topic to polity under prelims examination, and for the mains examination, it can be mapped to GS paper 2, salient features of the Indian Constitution, Union and state legislatures. So moving on to the previous year question, there has been a question in the year 2012 regarding the office of the Lok Sabha Speaker. Consider the following statements. So these kind of constitutional offices, the eligibility criteria as well as the functions, the objectives as well as the allowances and the salary that they actually get is all very important for your prelims examination in particular. Now let us understand what this particular news is talking about. So, as the first session of the 18th Lok Sabha begins today, newly elected members of the parliament, that is the MPs, are set to take their oaths, which is a critical constitutional requirement before the House that can actually start its legislative functions. So, moving forward, let us understand when does the term of an MP begin, okay? So, the 5-year term of a Lok Sabha MP begins when the Election Commission of India actually declares the results as stipulated under Section 73 of the Representation of People Act 1951. Moving forward, from this particular day, the Member of Parliament are entitled to their rights as elected representatives, which includes receiving salaries and allowances from the day of the Election Commission of India's notification. Moving on, This commencement of the term also subjects these MPs to the anti-defection law, which allows their political party to request disqualification if they change their allegiance towards the particular party, that is the current party which they have been elected from. Okay. Now, significance of this particular practice of parliamentary oath. First one, despite the start of their term, winning the election and commencing the term does not automatically enable an MP proceedings. Okay, just winning it and being declared as a winner does not mean that this person is actually automatically enabled to participate in the proceedings of the House, to debate and to vote in the Lok Sabha. An MP must take their seat in the House by making and subscribing to the oath or affirmation, which is actually mentioned in Article 99 of the Constitution. Also, participating or voting in the House proceedings without taking an oath actually incurs a financial penalty of ₹500, which is actually specified under Article 104 of the Constitution. Also, however, there is an exception. That is, an individual can become a minister even without being elected to the parliament, and this particular person must secure a seat in either the Lok Sabha or the Rajya Sabha within a period of 6 months, and during this period they can participate but they cannot vote in the proceedings of the House. Moving on, let us actually understand the parliamentary oath, how it is actually given. So, the Constitution's third schedule contains the text of parliamentary oath, and here it reads, I, so and so, having been elected or nominated a member of the Council of States or the House of the People, do swear in the name of God or solemnly affirm that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of India as by law established, that I will uphold the sovereignty and the integrity of India, and that I will faithfully discharge the duty upon which I am about to enter. So, this is actually the oath that the particular elected MP actually takes. Okay. Next one, evolution of this particular oath. The draft constitution, which was prepared by the drafting committee and which was chaired by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, initially did not invoke any particular term as God in any of the oaths. The committee emphasized a solemn and sincere promise to bear faith and allegiance to the Constitution of India only. However, during the Constituent Assembly discussions, there were certain members like K.T. Shah as well as Mahavir Tyagi. They proposed the amendments in order to include the term God on the oath, arguing for the liberty of the believers to swear in the name of God while allowing the agnostics to solemnly affirm. Also, Ambedkar had actually accepted these amendments, recognizing that for some, invoking God provides the necessary moral sanction for fulfilling their duties as well as the obligations. And then moving on, the last significant change to this particular oath-taking practice actually came with the Constitution 16th Amendment Act of 1963, which added a commitment in order to uphold India's sovereignty and integrity, which were actually based on the recommendations of the National Integration Council. Moving forward, now let us understand what is this procedure for taking the oath. Okay. So, before taking up the oath or the affirmation, the MPs must submit their election certification to the Lok Sabha staff. And this safeguard actually was introduced after a 1957 incident where a mentally unsound individual posed as an MP and took the oath. So, this is actually, it should not be allowed. Then, MPs can take the oath or affirmation either in English or any of the 22 languages that is actually specified as per the 8th schedule of the Constitution. Also, MPs must use the name mentioned in their election certificate and must adhere very strictly to the text of the oath. And also, deviations such as adding suffixes or additional phrases are actually not permitted, as seen when the recently BJP MP, whose name was Sadhvi Pragya Singh Thakur, added a suffix to her name in 2019, and the Rajya Sabha MP Swati Maliwal actually ended her oath with Inquilab Zindabad in 2024, both of whom were asked to retake their oaths. Okay. So, this is actually not allowed. Adding prefixes or suffixes to the oath or any kind of deviations from what has been mentioned in the election certificate is actually not allowed. And also, now looking at a personal choice, whether oaths and affirmations, that is, you can actually choose between the two. Let us see. Oaths and affirmations are a personal choice for the MPs, and in the Lok Sabha, 87% of MPs swore, that is in the previous Lok Sabha, 87% of the MPs swore in the name of God, while 13% affirmed their allegiance to the Constitution of India, and MPs have sometimes chosen to swear in the name of God in one term and affirm in another. So it is totally, the discretion of the person who's elected to power. Now let us understand what is the difference between the oath and affirmation, okay? An oath and an affirmation serve the same legal function of pledging truthfulness or commitment to the duty, but they differ in the invocation of a higher power, okay? So an oath is nothing but it is a solemn promise to fulfill one's duties or tell the truth, typically invoking a deity, reflecting the individual's religious beliefs. Whereas if you actually take affirmation, it is a solemn and formal declaration made without any kind of religious reference. That is, deity or God is not involved here, used by individuals who prefer a non-religious pledge or who do not believe in a particular deity. And also, now let us understand what is actually the case of oath taking by the MPs who are actually in jail, okay, or who are sentenced to a jail term. The Constitution specifies that if an MP does not attend the Parliament for a period of 60 days, their seat can actually be declared vacant. And also, the courts have allowed the MPs in jail to take their oath in the Parliament to comply with this requirement. For example, if you see, during the oath taking for the last Lok Sabha in June 2019, Atul Kumar Singh, an MP from Uttarakhand, who was in jail for serious criminal charges, was permitted by the court to take his oath in January 2020. So the next article that we'll be discussing about here is Create the Space for Governance with a Green Heart. So this particular article discusses about why it is important for the government in order to adopt the green policies in order to combat the environmental degradation via 5 strategies. Okay, one is climate resilience. Second is forest conservation. The third is Himalayan protection. Fourth is urban sustainability. And the fifth is public participation. So in this particular article, we'll be discussing about the climate change as well as green governance in India, and we can actually map this particular topic to GS paper 3 for the mains examination under environmental pollution and degradation and conservation. Okay. So moving forward, let us actually understand that there has been a question in 2017 mains examination with respect to that of climate change. So anything with respect to that of the environment, specifically the climate change, becomes important for both your prelims as well as the mains examination. Now moving forward, let us understand what this particular article is discussing about, okay? So, as India's new government term begins, urgent green policies are actually needed to address severe environmental degradation, climate vulnerability, urban unviability, Himalayan degradation, as well as public participation in the environmental decision making, ensuring sustainable development as well as ecological conservation. So, let us understand every aspect that we actually discussed in the initial slide, okay? So, first one is addressing the climate vulnerability. So, climate change is frequently mentioned by India's leadership, but very rarely, there is active participation which are actually, engaged with over here, except for, limited efforts like promoting the solar energy. Also, despite rising the energy consumption, there has been no significant moves to cut the emissions. And furthermore, if you see, essential remediatory aspects such as building the climate resilience, ensuring food security, and guaranteeing access to essentials have actually been neglected by the community. Also, as floods, famines, heat waves, wildfires, water scarcity, droughts have actually become increasingly common, contingency plans are necessary to protect the vulnerable population. Okay, so this is how we actually have to address the climate vulnerability. Now moving on, looking at what is the status of the forest cover and the green credits. So if you see, India is one of the world's lowest levels of green cover per capita when compared to the nations like Canada as well as China, whereas Canada is actually 8,953 per person and China is actually 130. And also, if we see over the past 2 decades, the qualitatively important forest cover has significantly declined and urban forestry remains inadequate. And also, the damage to our forests have been covered up with questionable accounting, which includes plantation forests and the tree cover in the urban centers. And also, we have recent legislations like the Forest Conservation Amendment Bill of 2023, pushed through by various parliament, needs to be repealed and robust new protections must be established. And also the next one is tackling the unlivability of the urban areas. Okay, so if you see, India's metropolitan centers have outgrown their planned capacity, specifically with respect to that of cities like Delhi and Mumbai, and many across the Gangetic belt face unacceptable levels of air pollution that we actually see in the newspaper, which actually severely affect the residents' lifespans. And also, cities such as Bengaluru and Delhi are also experiencing water shortages, forcing the poor to queue for hours for the bare minimum. Also, rivers like, if you speak specifically with respect to Chennai, you have the Adayar River and the Yamuna in Delhi have actually, converted or have turned into open sewers, while green spaces and water bodies have been built over. That is, here you actually have the constructions taking place on the river beds also, creating urban heat islands. And also, there is an urgent need for a national overhaul of sewage treatment, as currently only about 28% of the sewage generated by the Indian cities is being treated, which is a very, very concerning number. Also, moving on, next is environmental degradation in the Himalayas. So, climate changes have actually disproportionately affected Indian Himalayan region. How glaciers are actually rapidly melting, with predictions that up to 80% of their volume may disappear by this end of the century. And also, there is changes in the rainfall pattern as well as the temperature patterns. This has actually drastically affected the water and the food security of both the mountain inhabitants and much of the northern belt of India, that is North India. So, despite significant protests from the people of Ladakh as well as others demanding governmental action, their concerns have been largely ignored, possibly due to, the lack of political influence or active engagement of the politicians. And also, enhancing public participation. This is the last dimension. A significant issue which is underpinning these environmental challenges is the government's long-standing refusal to genuinely engage with the stakeholders and affected persons. Also, next one is the environmental impact assessment. These EIA mechanisms have become very, perfunctory, often ignored in the face of large projects. Also, the Chardham Highway project, if you take in case of Uttarakhand, passed with very minimal EIA scrutiny, and this has actually caused significant environmental damage, and it exemplified by the collapse of the tunnel in 2023 November. And also, the sanctity of this, EIA notification 2006 has been eroded with numerous amendments and EIA mechanisms, so that, it has to be elevated to statutory status in order to protect from such undermining. Okay. So, next one is to combat greenwashing. What is greenwashing? Greenwashing is actually a policy where you falsely portray that your particular project is actually environmentally safe and it is meeting all the environmental standards. Okay. So, greenwashing is the practice of falsely portraying an organization, products, activities or policies as environmental friendly to mislead consumers as well as enhance the public image of your particular project. And policies driven by the commercial interests such as the green credits as well as the compensatory afforestation have often replaced genuine conservation efforts. Next one is sustainable development must extend beyond commercially profitable initiatives. And also, enforcement mechanisms and bodies need to be empowered in order to ensure genuine adherence to the environmental laws. And finally, to conclude this particular topic, these environmental concerns that we saw, like the non-livability of the urban areas, then protection of the Himalayan areas, then EIA is actually not properly functioning, all these things, they are not luxuries, but they are essentials for the survival and the health of millions of people residing in India, particularly in the northern belt, where the level of pollution with respect to air and water have been considerably increasing. So, the absence of these issues from major political parties' election manifestos is very, very disappointing, but it is very disappointing, but at the same time, it is not irreversible as well. So though they have not committed to it in their election manifesto, they can focus after they are actually elected to power. So for the government to truly act as the steward of the people, it must prioritize the physical health of the country and also make it a point that they adopt a comprehensive approach for the sustainability of the environment. The next article that we'll be discussing about is advisory on organ transplantation may be put up at the airport. So as we know that the number of foreigners are actually significantly rising with respect to that of their organ transplantation in India, the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare has actually decided in order to come up with an advisory in order to sensitize the foreign patients with respect to the legal or the regulatory frameworks which is actually surrounding this particular organ transplantation. So in this particular article, we'll be discussing about organ transplantation and donation and also on this statutory organization of NATO, which is actually involved with transplantation of organs in India. And we can map this particular topic to prelims, that is polity for prelims, and as well as governance, and for mains examination it can be mapped to GS paper 2, government policies and interventions. So moving forward, there has been a previous year question not with respect to this particular organ transplantation but on a similar line, solid waste management rules. So these kind of advisories and rules are very, very important for your prelims examination. So moving forward, let us understand what this particular article is discussing about. So with a greater number of foreigners visiting India in order to undergo organ transplantation, the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare has issued an advisory in order to sensitize the international patients to the organ transplantation protocol as well as the legal framework in the country which revolves around organ transplantation. Okay, so let us understand what is this legal framework for organ transplantation in India. In 1994, the Transplantation of Human Organs Act, that is THOA, was promulgated by the Government of India. So this particular act regulates the removal, the storage as well as the transplantation of the human organs and also allows for the transplantation of organs from both the living as well as the deceased donors. This is very, very important. And where is the application of this particular regulation is that the act is applicable in all the states and the UTs except for the states of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. Since health is actually a state subject, these states actually have their own act on this particular subject. Also, this act made the commercialization of the organs as a punishable offence and legalized the concept of brain death in India, allowing the deceased donation by obtaining the organs from the brainstem dead persons. Okay. Now moving forward, let us understand about the statutory organization of NOTTO. This is NATO, which stands for National Organ and Tissue Transplant Organization. Okay, so it is a statutory body under the Transplantation of Human Organs Act 1994. The aim is to improve the access to transplantation for the needy citizens by promoting organ donation over here. And also, if you see the parent organization, it is Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Here it is actually divided, or it has two divisions. One is National Human Organ and Tissue Removal and Storage Network. The other one is National Biomaterial Center. Okay, so this is also called as the National Tissue Bank. If you see this particular network, it functions as an apex center for procurement, registry and distribution of the organs and tissues in the country. And the next one, if you see about the National Tissue Bank, its aim is to fill up the gap between demand and supply as well as quality assurance in the availability of various tissues. Okay. Now moving forward, let us look at what are all the key rules which are related to the organ transplantation for foreigners in India. First one is medical visa requirement. Here, the foreign nationals must obtain a medical visa specifically for the purpose of undergoing organ transplantation in India. The next one is age requirement for the donors. All the living donors must be aged 18 or above. This is very, very important. And if you see with respect to that of restriction on the donors, no Indian donor is permitted to donate organs to a foreign recipient unless they are a near native. This is very, very important. And also, what is the definition of near native? A near relative includes the spouse, a son, daughter, father, mother, brother, sister, grandfather, grandmother, grandson or granddaughter. So these are near relatives, and except for these conditions, no Indian donor is permitted to donate an organ to other foreigners. And moving forward, certification and relationship. Okay, so the relationship between the donor and the recipient must be certified by a senior official of the embassy of the recipient's country of origin in India. Also, if there is no diplomatic establishment of the recipient's country in India, the certificate must be issued by the government of the recipient's country. The next one is deceased donors. Here, the foreigners can register through their treating hospitals to be included in the waiting list registry for the organs from the deceased donors, and also allocation of organs from deceased donors to foreigners will only be considered when no Indian patient is available to receive the organ. And also the last one is prohibition of commercial dealing. Here, the commercial dealing in the human organs or tissues is strictly prohibited and punishable by law in India. The next article that we'll be discussing about is Government Mulls Dedicated Bank for MSMEs to enhance the credit access and economic growth. So, in this particular article, we'll be discussing about what is the need for having a dedicated or a separate bank for the MSMEs, and what are these MSMEs will be our takeaways specifically for the prelims examination. Okay, so here we'll be discussing about MSME, which stands for micro, small as well as medium enterprises, and this particular topic can be mapped to GS paper 3 economy for both your prelims and the mains examination under economic development and inclusive growth. So moving forward, there has been a previous year question in the year 2013 in the prelims examination with respect to the priority sector lending by the bank. So overall, banking sector is very, very important. Okay. So moving forward, let us understand what this particular article is discussing about. Okay. So the Indian government is considering establishing a dedicated bank in order to directly lend to the MSME, that is the micro, small and medium enterprises, in order to boost the economic activity as well as the creation of jobs, and also to reduce the inaccessibility to the credits that the MSMEs have been facing of late. For that, let us actually understand what is the MSME. But here we will understand what is the proposed scheme first. Here the objective is to address the direct credit shortages for the MSMEs, and also the type or the ownership structure is potential hybrid, that is the PPP model, that is the public-private partnership, and more details of the schemes are yet to be finalized. Okay, we will discuss as this actually grows up and something substantiative comes up. So now let us understand what are these MSMEs. These are considered the engines of India's economic growth, comprising over 90% of the total enterprises and credited for generating the highest employment opportunities. So if you actually see here the revised definition of the MSMEs in this particular box according to the different parameters. So it is called as micro when the investment in plant and machinery is less than 1 or equal to 1 crore, and it's called again a micro when the annual turnover is lesser than or equal to 5 crores, and number of MSMEs, that is with respect to that of NSS data, it is 6.3 crore, and number of MSME Udyam portal is 1.5 crore registered. And also it is called as small when it is lesser than or equal to 10 crores, and with respect to investment in plant or the machinery, and annual turnover if it actually has 50 crore or equal to less than 50 crore or equal to that, and number of MSMEs as per the NSS, it actually includes 3.3 lakh, and this is actually 4.6 lakh, that is according to the Udyam portal. And if you see medium, investment in plant and machinery, if it is actually 50 crore or equal to that, that is greater than or equal to, then the annual turnover, if it is actually less than 250 or equal to that, and then if you see the number of MSMEs, that is the medium scale industry over here, if you enterprises, if you see it is 5,000 and then 42,000 according to the Udyam portal. Moving forward, let us understand what is the requirement or the reason for a dedicated bank. So first one is importance of MSMEs, because the MSMEs employ over 110 million people, which is nothing but 23% of India's labor force, and the economic contribution also, it contributes 27% to India's GDP, 38.4% to manufacturing output, as well as 45% to the exports. And then if you see underfinanced MSMEs, despite being significant, MSMEs are underfinanced in the current mechanism where SIDB provides the refinancing to the banks lending to the MSME. Here let us understand what is SIDB, or we'll actually come to that. So here the credit gap, it has been observed that MSME credit penetration in India is 14%, which is compared to which is comparatively very low, where it is 50% in the United States and 37% in China. And also there is a 25 trillion rupee credit gap for the MSME sector in India when compared to the other countries. The next reason why do we need a dedicated bank is that need for specialized bank. There is a need for dedicated banks because the large banks do not fully understand the requirements of this MSME sector. And also now let us understand about what is this SIDBI, okay. So SIDBI is nothing but it is Small Industries Development Bank of India, and it is an apex regulatory body for overall licensing and regulation of MSME finance companies in India, and it actually acts as a principal financial institution for promotion, for financing as well as development of the MSME sector, as well as for the coordination of functions of institutions which are engaged in similar activities. Moving forward, it is under the jurisdiction of the Department of Financial Services, Ministry of Finance, with headquarters at Lucknow and having its offices all over the country. And SIDBI was constituted as a statutory body in 1990 through the Act of a Parliament, and it is constituted as a wholly owned subsidiary of IDBI Bank and was delinked from IDBI as of March 27, 2000. Now moving forward, SIDBI is one of the 5 All India financial institutions regulated and supervised by the Reserve Bank of India. See, all these are very static things that you need to know, because any of these can actually appear as one of the statements in your prelims examination, okay. And then all the other 4 apart from SIDBI include the Exim Bank of India, the NABARD, the NABFID as well as the NHB. But recently NHB came under the government control by taking more than 51% of the stake. So here the suggestion will be, alternative proposal is converting the SIDBI into a full-fledged bank. Direct lending to the MSMEs is one of the proposals, and next one is the interest rates. Here there is a proposal to offer loans to MSMEs at the lower interest rate similar to that of the housing loans. And also, to actually conclude this particular topic, the proposal for a dedicated MSME bank. This aims to address significant credit gaps and support the growth and development of this particular sector, which is crucial for India's economic growth. The next article that we'll be discussing about here is, after years, Russia approves a draft logistics agreement to be signed with India, and this agreement is RELOS, which actually stands for Reciprocal Exchange of Logistics Agreement. Okay, so here we'll be looking into what this agreement is and how it is actually significant for enhancing the future ties between India as well as Russia. Okay, so here India-Russia relations is very important, and also this reciprocal exchange of logistics agreement, that is RELOS, is very important, and we can actually map this particular topic to GS paper 2 under mains examination under bilateral, regional and global groupings and agreements involving India and or affecting India's interests. So moving forward, in 2017, similar such investment agreement, that is BTIA, broad-based trade and investment agreement, has actually been asked in the prelims examination. Now let us understand what this particular article is discussing about, okay. So after several years of delay, the India-Russia Mutual Logistics Agreement is ready for conclusion, and this agreement is named as RELOS, that is Reciprocal Exchange of Logistics Agreement, which has been delayed for several years, is now approved by or approved from the Russian side, and this actually awaits signing by both the countries in order to become effective. And once it is actually concluded, it will be valid for a period of 5 years, very important, and will be automatically renewed unless either party decides to terminate it. So all these features are very important, okay. Sometimes it can be asked that RELOS, often seen in news, is significant with respect to ties between which of the following countries, okay, or it is between India and which of the following countries. So these kind of news snippets are very important for your prelims examination. So this particular India-Russia Logistics or Exchange of Logistics Agreement will align with India's existing logistic agreements with several other countries, including the all Quad members with France, Singapore, South Korea as well as Vietnam. Now moving forward, let us understand what is a logistics agreement and how it is actually significant. So A logistics agreement is an administrative agreement between two countries that allows their military forces to use each other's bases and facilities for the purposes like refueling, repair, as well as supplies. And this actually simplifies the process of military operations when operating away from their home country, making it easier for both the nations, in this case India as well as Russia, forces to support each other during the joint exercises, during training, disaster relief and other kind of operations. It is similar to a series of such agreements that India has actually signed with a number of countries, beginning with the one that India signed with the United States in the year 2016. And this mutual logistics agreement will enhance the operational turnaround and interoperability between the Indian as well as the Russian militaries, providing strategic benefits for both the countries. And also among the three services, that is, if you see the Air Force, Navy as well as the military, that is the armed forces, the Indian Navy has been the biggest beneficiary of these administrative arrangements, improving its operational turnaround and the interoperability on the high seas. Also, if you see highlights of this laws, it will enable the access to military facilities for the exchange of fuel and provisions on mutual basis. This will actually simplify the logistical support, and it increases the operational turnaround for the military operations away from the home bases that we already saw. Specifically, it will give India access to the Russian facilities in the Arctic region, which is of strategic importance due to new shipping routes and India's increasing investments in the Russian eastern region specifically. Also, we will actually look into the India-Russia 2+2 dialogue. Okay, so this actually 2+2 dialogue is with US as well, right? India-US 2+2. Once it is asked in the examination also. So, the 2+2 dialogue is a meeting format which actually involves the foreign as well as the defense ministers of India as well as the allies, that is the strategic allies, which predominantly focuses on security as well as the strategic issues of the particular region. And this ministerial dialogue helps the partners gain a deeper understanding of each other's strategic concerns and sensitivities, considering political factors on both the sides. And India conducts 2+2 dialogues with 4 key strategic partners, that is India-US, India-Australia, Japan as well as Russia. Now let us solve few prelims as well as mains practice question. The first question reads, as per the rules related to organ transplantation for foreigners in India, which one of the following statements is correct? A. All living donors willing to donate organs to the foreigners must be aged 21 and above. This is wrong. It is 18. And no Indian donor is permitted to donate organs to a foreign recipient unless they are a near relative. Yes, this we had actually discussed. The relationship between the donor and the recipient must be certified by the government of India. No, this is wrong. The next one, foreign nationals need not obtain a medical visa specifically for the purpose of undergoing organ transplantation in India. This is also wrong. So, since only statement B is actually correct, the answer is option B. The second question reads, consider the following statements about the Small Industries Development Bank of India, SIDB, which is recently seen in news. It is an apex regulatory body for overall licensing and regulation of MSMEs in India. Yes, this is correct. It was established as a non-statutory body. No, this is wrong. It's a statutory body. Then headquartered in Lucknow, it is actually under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of MSME. No, this is actually wrong. It is under the Ministry of Finance. So, since only statement 1 is correct, the answer will be option A. Moving on to the third question, the reciprocal exchange of logistic agreement, that is RELOS, is sometimes seen in the news, is in the context of negotiations held between India and which of the following countries? United States, this is wrong. France, wrong. Japan, wrong. So, since it is actually Russia, the answer will be option B. The fourth question reads, consider the following statements. The 5-year term of the Lok Sabha MP starts from the time they take an oath or affirmation in the House. No, this is wrong. It is from the time where the Election Commission declares the results. And not taking an oath or affirmation in the House leads to the cancellation of the candidature. This is also wrong because they are actually levied a fine of ₹500 of penalty according to Article 104 of the Constitution. Since both are wrong, the answer will be neither 1 nor 2. So, answer is option D. So moving forward, the fifth question reads, consider the following statements. Without being elected to the parliament, a person can participate in the proceedings of the house. Yes, this is correct. A member of parliament can take the oath or affirmation in English or in any of the 22 languages certified in the constitution. Yes, this is actually correct. A member of the parliament can take oath from jail. This is also correct. Since all the statements are correct, the answer will be option D. Moving forward, let us actually solve the mains practice question. Analyze the green policies implemented by the Indian government, highlighting the deficiencies and propose the measures in order to enhance public participation in the environmental decision-making processes. So here, the approach answer for this question is actually divided into the introduction, the body, as well as the conclusion. So in the introduction, we will actually outline the intent of the green policies by the Indian government in order to address the environmental challenges. Next, in the body, we will be describing about the existing green policy and also at the same time highlight the shortcomings, where we will discuss the issues like inadequate forest cover, urban unavailability and ineffective sewage treatments. And also moving forward, we'll be discussing about the public participation issues, where we will elaborate on the limited stakeholder engagement and flawed EIA, that is the environmental impact assessment. And moving forward, we'll actually give the suggested measures like recommending the enhancing EIA statutory status, promoting the transparent governmental engagements and implementing the genuine conservation efforts. And towards the end, in the conclusion, we will emphasize the need for comprehensive and participative environmental governance in order to ensure effective policy implementation and sustainability. So with this, we've actually come to the end of our daily news analysis discussion. So for more and regular updates, please do like, share and subscribe to Narayana IAS Academy YouTube channel. Thank you.